ascending path towards consciousness, evolution, revolution.
Art Mancheno here. I want to share some more insights on how I think we can best manifest. I take into account, firstly, that your body is an energy instrument. I stress that a lot. To go over some of this, your eyes pick up light waves, different colors or different frequencies or cycles per second. Your ears pick up sound waves, which are basically molecular vibration waves traveling in the air until it hits your eardrum. Smell and taste are chemical, and then there's a bunch of other senses, whether it's your ability to detect your own blood pressure, referred to as interoreception, or your position, time, space, proprioception, and mechanoreception. So we're given this body, and we're supposed to try to make sense of everything that's going on, or the universe. And I theorized, I hear so many, enlightened people speak about, let's say, manifestation or, different concepts that have to do with how to interact with the universe best, is the way I put it. In other words, how do you maximize what you were given, your body, your mind, heart and soul? All of those are basically essential for manifestation. And the reason why is basically the amount of energy you commit to it. I see everything as an energy system. So while your body is an energy instrument that you were given to perceive different energy forms around you, the universe itself is an energy system, which we interact with. So now you put more energy into, let's say, a focused thought. Well, you're going to have more invested on different levels, where it's more likely to become reality. Now let me explain to you very simply some of my ideas as to how this works or why it works. Firstly, I learned how to work it. So it's like and I have some basic theories as to how and why it worked. So I was able to do the impossible first. And then I thought, well, I'd like to be able to explain it linearly to people. And by that, I mean more scientifically minded, which, I've always been too. It's nice to have the science. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff we don't know. And this topic really falls into that area where, science has yet to go, where no man has gone before, or no mind has gone before. But I had some realizations in my process and thinking and experience where, luckily I had to change some knowledge and came across the right people to put me in a position to be able to theorize as to how and why this works. So, to put it very simply, I believe that the ability to manifest comes with the amount of energy you put into, number one, what you're doing. But before that, that's just part of the process, is getting your mind to a state of supreme focus, like laser focus. Okay? There's that quote that says, "Know thyself." And I knew that my Achilles heel was my inability to want to, or it wasn't really inability, it's just that my mind is always racing from one thing to another. And I knew if I wanted to stick to something, the first thing I needed to do was stay focused. And so, I looked into my own experiences in history throughout my life, and I knew that the most focused I ever was after prolonged exercise, essentially. So that's what I focused on initially. And my goal was really to connect to the universe as symbiotically as possible, to just work with what's going on around me at all times. And so, I realized while there are all these, great minds out there trying to help people figure out how to manifest better, I thought, well, okay, seeing as our body's an energy instrument and this matrix is an energy system, I thought, well, wouldn't the greatest thing you could possibly do is learn how to make your body, your mind, your heart, your soul, to be able to work congruently with whatever energy system you're in, which, is the universe. So to me, that's the most important thing. It's figuring out exactly how your body works, how we are wired, and then empowering yourself to be able to have a greater effect on your environment. So, all of this is basically, the way I see it is it's based on energy. And there's a lot of different kinds of energy, some more subtle than others. We only see a certain range of the visible spectrum. Same with sound, so on and so forth. So there's more energy spectrum out there. It's just that we're not as sensitive to it. And these exercises I'm about to share with you, actually part of what I believe happens is you become more sensitive to particular forms of energy that are more subtle, that we normally don't have access to. So your sensory system becomes more acute. And I'll go into that a little bit more later. But so focus being the first step, and knowing myself and my history, exercise was the way to do it. It's like the first 23 years of my life, I would accomplish some awesome things, but it was surely through work and discipline. So if I were to choose any trait, one trait to have an abundance of, it would be discipline. With discipline, you can teach yourself an instrument, sticking to it. You can teach yourself another language. You can do anything. It's just the sheer will and domination of discipline, making yourself go through the process. So that's the linear approach. Most people understand that. That's the way you get things done. So that was the first 23 years of my life. Highly successful using that method. And then I came across this method, which I think it's groundbreaking. Well, I know it is. It's like, I've sat on it for a couple decades. Initially, I was wondering, is this something I want to share with the world? And I thought it was too powerful to share. But now looking at everything that's going on around the world, I'm like, the people need this knowledge. And so initially, it's exercise to make your mind focused. And that's basically the reason why I'm going to try to stick to mainly the neurology that I believe, is behind what's going on when I refer to what I'm going to call right now Mancheno's manifestation technique, or MMT. There's a financial MMT, which we're going through right now, which is modern monetary theory. You can just print money out of thin air, but no, this is more on manifesting. And so, focus. When you're exercising, what's happening is you're constantly firing off your extensor muscles. Like, let's say when you're running, you have to keep your back straight, you don't want to lose balance or whatever. So your body's automatically, adjusting to whatever forces are put on it. And there's a part of the brain, one of the first that you developed in the brainstem, called the reticular activating system. And this has been the focus of a lot of motivational speakers lately. I've heard it mentioned a lot of times. And so it's responsible for focus, awareness, consciousness. It's actually in there. And also, it's a filter of information. In other words, you don't want to get too much information from your environment. It could, it's basically your brain supposedly can only handle so much information processing before, it's too much. So it filters stuff, basically, like let's say if you want to focus on something, like a cup, okay? Your mind thinks of a cup and starts looking for a cup if you're looking for a cup. And so it helps you do pattern recognition in that sense, as in physical objects. Or, you're focused on a bright yellow Lamborghini. Actually, those are pretty rare. Let's just say a blue car. And all of a sudden, you really notice there's a lot of blue cars. It's because your brain's trying to match up with what it seeks. Now, there's also hierarchical. So basically, a level of importance as to what's going on around you. If all of a sudden a tiger shows up, and I'm doing this video, I'm going to pay attention to the tiger and forget about the video because it's a survival mechanism. So it's a very important part of your brain, and it's one of the first that we developed. So it's super important because it was developed first. So it's very primal. Now, what's lesser known about this part of the brain that none of the other motivational speakers ever mention is that essentially it assists in firing off your extensor muscles or activating them or flexing, or in this case extending. So your extensor muscles, flexor, bicep, extensor, tricep. Okay, so it's against gravity. You move up like this, you're firing off your back muscles. So that's part of the process. So when you're running, you're constantly adjusting. You don't really have to think about your posture, but it's automatic. That's how hardwired we are to this system, where essentially you don't have to think about it. The way you're sitting right now and listening to this video or standing or whatever you're doing, you don't have to think about how you compose your physical self. It's automatic to be the most comfortable. You don't have to think about it. So think about that. It's so hardwired within you, that sense, that it's autopilot for us. So I figured out that you could, and this is what I believe, okay? Like I said, I was able to, I came across, I'm just going to say it, I was divining this information, and later I basically would get slowly some of the neurological reasons as to why that could happen. Like I had a friend that was going through some neuro program, and he mentioned that, this part of the brain responsible for extensor muscles, and then he gave the example when you're a fetus, you're bent over. As you get older, you become more erect, and then as you get older, you start to hunch over again, your mind declines. So there's that property to our relationship with gravity. So we're talking super fundamental forces, okay, and how our body interacts and reacts to it. So by exercising, you're creating more focus because you're affecting this part of the brain called the reticular activating system. And so it's super important because I believe one of the most important factors to manifesting, aside from desire, first you have to really want it, okay? That's like number one, really. Until you actually want to do it, no, the rest of this isn't going to happen. But if you really want something and you really want it, then the technique I'm sharing with you right now is, for me, it's a surefire bet. I mean, it's just the way it is. But I've had years of reflection, and I put myself through the process, which was super rigorous, when I had a lot of discipline. So, you have to gauge where you're at right now. If you don't have much discipline, you can't get yourself to the gym, then start there, okay? Because it's the first step for me, exercising just to focus the mind. So exercise also increases endorphins, which are the feel-good chemicals. And it's, our bodies is this amazing chemical factory. It's greater than any pharmaceutical laboratory possible, and you have access to it. You know, a lot of this process is taking yourself to a state of bliss. Imagine that. You have the ability to experience bliss. You just got to know how to take yourself there. So this process does that. The exercise portion, mainly to focus your mind, but it's also to get rid of, let's say, stressors like cortisol. As you exercise, you break down the molecule, and high amounts of it cause anxiety. And you want normal amounts. You know, you don't want to be too low on cortisol because then you don't do anything. You don't have the motivation to do much. But in high amounts, that's not good either. It can affect your immune system even, make it weaker. So the idea is the exercise mainly to focus, but it also has a lot of biochemical reactions and effects to put yourself in a state of higher expression. I really don't know what word to use at the moment. State of being. And so, you know, endorphins kicking in, that makes you feel better. Okay. And then you got, obviously, when you exercise, you're moving, a lot of movement, a lot of electrical stimulus from your environment and your position, time, space, which I believe is the most important sense that you could stimulate in order to make your mind focused is a lot of movement. Okay, so if I were to give a hierarchy to exercises as to which exercises might take you here better, or better bang for the buck, you know, I would say gymnastics first, because that's a lot of involvement in balance and posture and knowing where you are in time space, you know, as you're flipping in the air. But more realistically, for most people, I would recommend, if you want to be a super badass, Taekwondo. Now, a lot of people argue, well, you know, as far as fighting technique, you know, that's not the point. It's to make you use your body in a way that you're not used to, which is basically, you're used to using your hands a lot, but not as much your feet, you know, moving them around the air. So, you know, I would say to make your kids smarter, have them take Taekwondo. Believe it or not, there's a lot of benefits to doing martial arts of that type. You know, self-confidence. They have a great philosophy. You know, so, but that would be my recommendation. And then, you know, things that involve agility. Dancing could even be a great exercise form to take yourself there. And I use that mainly now. Hours of dance, using external energy, music. So you're really taking in the stimulus. And depending on where you are, like Burning Man is one of the most amazing events because, you know, you're dealing with people from around the world. You're dealing with artwork that's next level. You don't know what you're going to see next. A lot of music. And then the environment itself draws you into reality. So you're very focused at the same time. And so the process that I'm telling you kind of brings you to a state where you're super saturated with information from your position, time, space through movement. And I gave you, you know, my favorite, or what I believe to be some of the best exercises, some of them. So the more movement involved, the more agility, sports, the better for your mind. So 2 hours of that. That's what it took me. And that's when I was super disciplined, pushing myself really hard. And I've always excelled in like sports, martial arts, that kind of thing. So, and knowing yourself is partly that. So find some things that you love to do. Do it over and over and over and over and over. Something that you can do over and over and over. And stick to it, number one. So that's door number one to Mancheno's manifestation technique, is to use your body to focus your mind. Not only that, the exercise also does more blood and oxygen to the brain, so more nutrients are arriving. And really it's a cascade of infinite biochemical reactions all putting you in a better state of existence. Now, what do you do with that focus? Well, now, the idea, number one, is to push yourself so much physically that your brain itself gets tired of telling yourself to do something else physically. So not only do you wear out your body, but your mind just gets tired. I mean, that's a lot of exercise. That is, making yourself spent. It's like done. And so it's not an easy place to get to. And that's just step one. Fortunately, it's a 3-hour process. It's the first 2 hours that involved this much physical effort. The third hour is more, okay, so I believe that your conscious mind, the part of your brain that's telling yourself to keep going and pushing, gets tired. And now it's almost like you get into a trance state of mind because you're just letting go of the physical. You address the physical using your body and exercise because it's a physical world. So now, we get a little metaphysical here too. That's a lot of physicals. But anyway, so then you focus on, essentially, it's a visualization technique that works for me super powerfully. And that is, I imagine tapping into, theoretically, what's the greatest energy source that I could imagine. And this is what I imagine. If you think there's a greater energy source, please put that in the comments and share, because, I'm always open to learning more. I'm always that way. So essentially, I imagined, I didn't like any of the definitions of what people refer to as God, regardless of, religion. So it's not just the Western view of God or, whatever. I just, I couldn't find anything that I felt was right. Okay, so I thought, well, geez, here I am. I might as well give it a thought myself as to what I would call if I had my own personal God. What would that be? And I thought, okay, I know purity exists in the universe, and it's rare, and it's beautiful, and it's to be cherished in this world. And so I knew, and it's like as you get older, you kind of realize things aren't as on the up and up as they should be. So I thought, something to emulate as far as energy system that's super powerful if it exists in this matrix would be purity. So to me, source is the most pure in the universe. And so the first hour, focus, then what do I focus on? Taking in this pure energy, and now the exercises go from whatever it takes to get you all amped up, work out whatever angst or stress you may have in your life. It's more raw, more primal. So, and let me bring up this concept called shadow work that I've heard within the last 5 years mainly. The only way I would ever consider this concept of dealing with shadow work is essentially, okay, I consider shadow negative. And, no matter how positive and great you are, you're going to go through experiences that are positive and not so positive. So let's say you had an issue with someone at work, or you go to a gas station or electric charging area and someone cuts in front of you or whatever. These things kind of build up a little bit of angst, and during the first phase, you use that energy. It's energy, whether positive or negative. Let's say something's really bothering you. Use that energy to push yourself. That's a great motivator. So what you're doing is you're becoming one of the greatest alchemists possible. You're taking something that has this energy and then converting it to something else that's better. So you don't want to keep it as angst, no, because that's not positive for you. Whether it's mentally, spiritually, physically. What you do is you address it. Don't ignore it. Use that energy and go, roar, that person really pissed me off, and do a couple more sets or reps. And then what's interesting is you're addressing that energy correctly and in a positive way. So that's what I consider shadow work. I would never call it shadow work. I would just call it being a superb alchemist and part of Mancheno's manifestation techniques. So it's not about ignoring things that aren't positive. It's addressing them in a healthy manner. Now, so focusing on this pure energy. And I had a vision during this process when I first came across this. I was having visions for the first time in my life, so I knew that my mind was processing some really heavy data. It's like to the point where I was really, really delving inside the core of our brain, in a sense, our mind, and taking myself to places which were not believable. Like, able to do things that are just straight up not possible. But yet I was doing them, and I had people that would tell me, Art, for example, the first thing I manifested was to become younger. And I was only 23. It's like, if you're younger than 23, you think 23 is old. But if you're like older than 23, you think 23 is not that old, and it's not. But yet I was able to tap into properties, using the body to do things that are considered not possible. And so the third day, since I'm going to talk about breath work anyway, I'll share with you what I was doing and what I was focusing on. So, essentially, the breath work that I was doing to become younger, specifically, was using my breath to take in this pure energy. Now, that's what I would start the third hour. Okay, after getting my mind focused, getting my conscious mind worn out, and basically putting myself in a trance. It's like, it's almost like you go from, there's a particle wave duality to the universe, going from particle state to more wave state. So it's more from the physical world to the more energetic world. And since you're in a high state of focus, you're able to imagine things like, working with this higher pure energy. And so in the vision I had was essentially that, I realized that, I thought if you could put all the energy in the universe that exists within a circle, that would have to include source in it. So you could actually define source and put them in a circle with your mind, or her, whatever. And so I thought, in this vision, I see the circle, I see all of energy in the universe, good, bad, whatever, everything in between, in that circle. And so I immediately put myself in the center of the circle, and I was, I imagined I was in the circle now. And so I imagined focusing from where I was to the very top, and I realized that that's the highest energy I could tap into, purity-wise, good-wise, light-wise, love-wise. And then as you got away from that, it become closer to gray until you go to the sides, it's neutral gray. And then there's the opposite, where you start going into darkness, and the polar opposite of the goodness. Obviously, I wanted to work with the most powerful. So what's interesting is, throughout my years, I imagined that the line from the center where I was to the top as direct current, and everything just even a little bit far away from that would be a high frequency, cycles per second. Excitation is the way I look at it. And so I would only want to work with the most powerful. And part of the process, which I would hone in on, it was like 7 months of doing this when I was super disciplined, 3 hours a day. I created more exercises to make it more powerful. So what I would do using my breath, you don't just do it once. It's like, okay, you become super focused after the 2 hours exercise. Now you start working with, like I said, you go from more particle state, physical interaction, to energy. And so now I'm using my breath to visualize taking in this pure, powerful energy. And hands are up and facing up along the lines of gravity. And if you remember, I mentioned how your extensor muscle is partly excited through your reticular activating system. I believed that doing reverse engineering of the reticular activating system, that you essentially become more focused, because that part of the brain was focus, awareness, consciousness, so on and so forth. All things that excite the mind and extensor muscles. So I thought, well, wouldn't it be interesting if when you fire your extensor muscles, you become more focused, aware, blah, 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 since it's all kind of wired together. So hands up against the lines of gravity, perfectly. And supposedly that's, exciting your reticular activating system to kick in next level. So, because you want to stay super focused. Now, what I would visualize is this. Using your breath, and I even came up with exercises to take in more breath. It's like I would, in order to expand my lung capacity, after a while, it's like this super powerful drug naturally. Like I said, you're trying to take yourself to a state of bliss just using your body. And so breathing is a big part of that. There's techniques and beliefs just on breath work alone. But since, I like to take it to the next level, first is exciting the system, making it super focused, setting up the chemistry. So my potential for a greater experience is greater than someone that just starts off breath work. Breath work is next. First is setting up the perfect chemistry. Then you start working with stuff that even makes you feel better. So the idea is to take in as much breath as possible. And after a while, I would be like, okay, how can I improve this technique? So one thing I started doing was take in a big breath and then bear down. So it's like you're creating pressure from the inside of your lungs out to expand your chest cavity. See, that's the way I always think. It's like, how can I take it to the next level? How can I take in more breath? So basically, stretch your intercostal rib muscles so that you could take in more breath. And with this breath, you're taking in energy. You're visualizing taking in energy. And because you're so focused, you can hone in on it, and then you start to feel the chemistry changes. You're taking in more oxygen everywhere. And so it's like getting high. It's not getting to the point where, it's like you're getting dizzy or anything like that. That's different. This is, working powerfully with that. And the way I suggest doing breath, because, I think I became an expert at this, the way seriously I took it. And I learned a lot of this on my own. Like I said, I think I was divine this information. So the way you want to take in your breath, the best way to describe it is you want to do it passionately. So when you're breathing in, you want to really take in the energy, pure energy. And then I would imagine taking in white light And in physics, white light basically has all the colors in it. It's like when you shine a light at a diamond, you see the diffraction pattern of all these colors. Same with the rainbow. Light reveals its nature, in a sense. So, and I wasn't into chakras or anything like that, but I knew there were colors associated with chakras. And I thought, well, geez, instead of working with one color, why not just use white light and then let the universe balance you out? It would know what you need more than your conscious mind would think it needs. So use your breath, take in white light, and then within that white light is what I call the God particle, or source particle, or pure energy. And so, it's a daisy chain of thoughts, visualization process. I'm breaking it down as simply as I can get. I'm looking to share this information, so I'm giving you the straight dope. Okay, so imagine taking that into the infinite amount of space located within your atoms, your very atoms. It's supposed to be all energy, electron fields, that take up most of the space, and forces, and so on and so forth. So I thought, if I'm going to invite anything into myself, it would have to be the greatest energy in the universe. Like I said, if you think there's a better concept than pure energy, please put that in the comments, because I really want to know. So this worked for me to the point where, like the last time I practiced this, and that's decades after I came across it, I was able to manifest same day. And I have that recorded on Facebook. Recently on Facebook also I used that as a sort of a diary. And what's interesting is just the other day, memories pop up. And I had predicted in 2018, prior to this sickness that's gone around the world, a lot of things on financial events that would happen. And all of them have come into play in 2022, within the last few months. Now, these are things, you see, you have to be kind of smart in order to understand how great these predictions were. The reason why is most people don't follow finance. Not only that, but then you also got to know, well, what were we thinking in 2018? Were we thinking about any of these things being possible? No. And yet I was able to mention student loan defaults, which is a big thing this year. Still going through that process. I mentioned that bonds wouldn't be something like, let's say when stocks usually go down, bonds go up. And we don't have that going on this time. And I said that would happen in 2018. Spiking oil prices. This is before, the Russian conflict, obviously. 2018. What else? There was a couple other things that were just so not on anyone's radar in 2018, and yet they all happened. And it included, well, basically it was all of this I shared with a link, and the link was basically how Russia was detaching itself economically from the United States. So that's kind of pertinent now. I mean, we're in conflict with Russia. And so, all these things coming together, there are two things going on. One, I know I have been changed from this meditation technique to be able to tap into higher knowledge. And, most of you mundane people care about finance. And so, being able to channel that kind of information, have it on my timeline as proof. Right now I have it as a pinned post. So anyways, it's amazing. It's beautiful. And it's a gift. Obviously I do a lot of studying of finance. Otherwise I wouldn't know any of those things were even possible, even though they weren't possible or important in 2018. Anyways, another thing was I mentioned something about the value of the dollar. Now all the currencies are basically, the dollar's strong because other currencies are falling faster, but yet things cost more. So even the value of the dollar is dropping. Okay, going back to these manifestation techniques. So visualizing white light, taking into the infinite amount of space, that's with each breath. So you want to not just no. Okay, you're super focused, you are super amped, super powerful actually. All this movement and playing with your position time space, it sends a lot of electrical information, through your brainstem to your brain. So it's like turning up a dimmer switch. So you have person A. I'm going to tell you a story now, I guess. Person A and person B. The only difference is they're clones of each other completely. In every which way. Physically, mentally, they all have the same experiences. Let's say you could do that. You could just split a person two. So everything up until this morning is the exact same thing for, genetic expression, experiences. The only difference is this day, person A exercises for let's say 45 minutes minimum, enough to have an effect on your chemistry. And person B doesn't. Okay, so that's the first thing he did when they woke up. Now, the experiences that they go through are going to be the same. So, person A has coffee, and then they spill it on themselves. Ouch. They go, I got to change my pants. Okay, person B is going through the same thing. The only difference, person A did some exercise in the morning. Okay, they change their pants, they're on the way out the door. They shut the door and they smash their finger. And so person A is like, ouch, just like person B. But, it's it's like the stress factor of your environment starting to creep in a little, just a little. And then on the way to work, they get a flat tire. Now, at this point, person A is, both of them are noticing, this day is not going like the other days. But already, person B is starting to get sucked into the pull of negativity that may happen. They're more susceptible to outside influences. One of the great things about exercise is it also centers you. So before you want to radiate change in the universe through manifestation, it's important to be in tune with yourself first, whoever you are. And each one of us, I believe, has a frequency or modus operandi that is uniquely our own. So they get the flat fixed, and then they get to work, and they're fired. They lost their job. They're laid off. Now, at this point, anyone would be stressed, whether you exercise or not. But I am positing that the person A, would think, they're realizing what they're going through, and but their thoughts, I would argue, are going to be different because their biochemistry is at a higher state. So, in other words, they're further away from the possibility of feeling worse than they would because they destroyed the cortisol molecules. So it's not building up as much. So it actually can change your whole perception interaction with the world itself, because really it's what you're perceived to be. And so person A may go, well, I didn't really like this job, and I always wanted to look into this and, have a little money saved up, and, this is my chance to give that a shot, until I find my next move. Whereas person B is probably already affected negatively and drawn outside the self to the things that are going around, happening around them. So they're more susceptible to more angst. They don't have the route that the mind has of looking for solutions or positive possibilities and outcomes. And these are all things that aren't really discussed when we talk about exercise. Yet they're some of the most important. So anyways, so that's the story of person A and person B, really. Person A has, the better chemistry set up due to the exercise. So they're not going to be as stressed, is the whole point. I mean, if you want to put it simply. And person B, who didn't exercise that day, is, it's really ready to call it quits. So anyways, so really, so that's why it's important, I think, before you do the breath work, to have all that worked out, to be able to take yourself to a higher state. Now, when you're breathing, like I said, you want to do it passionately, because that also releases chemicals, which are taking you to a higher state even now. So, my belief is that the amount of energy that you put into this practice technique is important. And now you go from physical energy, position, time, space, input of electrical energy through your nerves, turning up the dimmer switch, your brain. Now you're sending all this, and it's like your brain works somewhat like a radio station, where if a radio station broadcasts with more power, they're able to have a greater effect in a longer range. Okay, so let's say you live in the San Francisco Bay Area, you listen to a certain radio station. The further you go away, you can still pick it up, and it's clear on your radio station. Same concept, only now you're dealing with your brain and it being able to emit thought waves further. Now, let me explain a little bit about that. So there are electrodes, I'm pretty sure most of you know, you could stick on the surface of your brain, EKG, or EEG. It's EEG, electroencephalogram. And it measures different, waves, beta, I think, theta, it's been a while. And so it can see what parts of your brain are active, and they got way more advanced machines now where, they can see particular parts of the brain that light up when you're thinking, or maybe more blood flow to an area. So things are getting pretty cool. It's what we apply this knowledge to, though. What I'm sharing with you is next level consciousness manifestation techniques. And I think that's what we've been sorely missing out of all the sciences. And like I said, this is more out there. But, like I say, it's like before gravity became a formula, it's something that existed, supposedly for all time space. So essentially, gravity existed way before we came up with the formula for it. So it was just as valid before man came up with a concept where we could measure it, 9.82 seconds per second. That's the rate of fall, I believe, in gravity. So anyway, I could be wrong. If I am, let me know in the comments. By the way, if you like what you're hearing, please hit like, subscribe, and share. I'm trying to get this information as far out as possible because I think we need it, and we really should know on the most basic fundamental level how to take this machine that we were given and have it work at a super optimum level. And what I'm giving you, is the insights as to why, let's say, you'd want to exercise, aside from getting healthier and looking better. There's the mind, spirit element too. So essentially, using your body to focus your mind, using your mind, what you're doing is you are while you're breathing in this energy, you're opening up your heart. Okay, now that's how my technique that I used was on the third day. I figured, okay, so what is being young? And I had broken it down to a couple things. One was having a heart that's open, more receptive. As we get older, we tend to protect it. And so it's a natural process. It's like you start to build layers that kind of prevent you from having certain experiences because you're more guarded. It's a protective mechanism. But it also cuts you off from potential experiences. So that's part of it, is having a bit more open heart to the universe. And the second is younger, having a more impressionable nervous system. So if you ever take a note, let's say if there's a kid and they're next to their mom, she's washing dishes, and a bird lands on the sill. And the kid would get all excited and go, "Oh my God, Mommy, a bird." And Mom would be, "Yeah, that's cool." But she won't be as excited as the kid. And that's because, it's a new experience for the kid. They've never seen that before. So they're more hyper responsive to external stimulus of that nature. So it's a nervous system that's more impressionable, and at the same time a heart that's more open. So I figured, okay, how am I going to be? So that's what I figured becoming younger was. It worked for me. So what I imagined was opening up my heart more while I was taking in these breaths. So I made a combination of breath work with opening heart. And the way I would breathe, when you do it passionately, it's deep and profound. You see, it's important. You can't just do breath work and whatever. You can't half-ass this shit. Excuse my language. You have to be 110%. Even 100% is not enough. You got to find ways to commit more. And this is part of the energy put in, the energy put out, for the manifestation, whatever it is that you're focused on. So taking in this breath, opening up your heart, and I figured, well, how does that work? And I imagined that, my lung capacity just, from the inside going out, creating more space to take in more air. At the same time, I was like, well, how does that work? How does that, invoke the heart, whatever? And I imagined, well, you're kind of doing it to the point where you should be massaging the heart some. So, it's like you're displacing the space with your lungs. Other things have to sort of respond to the lack of space for more air. And part of that is your heart being massaged. So now it's possible, if that's true, that you're releasing chemicals in the heart too. And like I said, it's like you're invoking physical, mental focus, spiritual, by taking in this energy. That at least I'm okay with that. I know some people aren't. You don't have to be. Just call it visualization. Whatever floats your boat. More importantly, whatever works. So you do that and you're purifying. The idea is when you're channeling this energy. Now, like I said earlier, the first 2 hours exercise, it's more raw, more primal. Now you change to more being elegant and dancing with the universe. It becomes a beautiful ballet with yourself and this energy now that you're looking to channel. So let's say I wanted to become more gracious. You start to move and imagine this energy that you're taking in. After a while, you've built it up. Now you should feel like it's coursing through you. If you don't feel that, you're not there yet. Or you have to learn how to take yourself there. That's the goal. So you're powerfully, not just half-assedly, powerfully channeling what it is that you're imagining. And you're owning it, okay? It's like you would have already built up so much power that's coursing through you physically that it's like before, I remember when I first tapped into this, the hair on my arm and neck, that's a trip, not just my arms, and my neck were raised. And I remember going, what did I tap into? And this is after already physically experiencing beautiful experiences like strongest guy in my high school. Winning that was like super high. I taught myself how to do mixed martial arts before it was a thing. That's how old I am. And I was able to beat every black belt I ever came across. Being lucky enough and nice enough and good enough that, luckily and good looking enough when I was younger. You have to have a great imagination too to go through a lot of this. But that was true. I'm saying you have to imagine me being good looking then. To where I had, a lot of beautiful relationship experiences. So, all these things, all these highs, natural highs, are the best, by the way. The way I would feel when I would tap into this power was essentially as if I could take every beautiful experience I ever had of all different kinds of, experiences possible. Whether, it's something like eating the most delicious dish that, it's your favorite, to getting your first beautiful, wonderful kiss, to, feeling the high, if you like roller coasters, to, you name it, winning at a sport, graduating from a college, so on and so forth. Whatever is a beautiful experience, hitting the top of a mountain, being at the ocean, just feeling, hearing the waves, feeling the sun on you, all of these put together and experiencing it at once. That's where you want to get to, or where you can get to. These aren't things you're going to experience right away. It's going to take a lot of practice. Like I said, you have to know where you're at. If you're not able to exercise as long as you need to, and as hard as you need to, then get started there. Chances are you're going to be more gifted, or, one part of the process will be easier for you. You may already have mastered that one part, but the other parts are foreign to you. You know where you're at. I'm just giving you what works for me, and I think works for others. So back to the exercise. Part of what's going on when you're exercising for that long, playing with gravity, is you're creating new brain cells. Now, when I went through chiropractic school, I was taught, and just like, that's if I went to medical school, they were taught the same thing, and that was that basically the nerves that you had in your central nervous system, your brain, your spinal cord, you didn't get any new ones. So basically, when you're young, you'd have more of these cells, these neurons, and then as you get older, they slowly die off, and you never get, regenerate them. Well, as it turns out, by the time you hit 50, you regenerate all of the neurons in what part of the brain? Oh goodness, why am I blanking out? Better do my own exercise and stay focused. So this is the hippocampus, part of the brain that's responsible for learning and memory. Better work on this myself. So what you're doing when you're exercising is you're exciting your brain to the point. It's very interesting because physical exercise is mainly, you would think, a physical process. Well, somehow the brain is excited to the point where it releases something called BDNF, brain-derived neurotropic factor, brain-derived neurotropic factor. And this chemical essentially allows the creation of new neurons. And so while you're doing that much exercise, you're creating these new baby neurons. And what's amazing is something to note that I never hear mentioned. And I tend to research to the point where information comes to me on the next level. It's like all that those financial predictions that I made. It's like I wish everyone were sort of savvy with that stuff to the point where they go, it's like this money manager. I wish he was my money manager, that kind of thing. I'm not saying I want to do that at all. My thing is consciousness. But, if they compare what their money manager told them to invest in before the downturn here, to know that information ahead of time, you could capitalize on it in a major way. And you always have experts, anyways, let's get back to the consciousness, So you're creating these new neurons, and what I know is that these new neurons aren't the same. They don't work the same as your existing neurons. And let me explain how. So there's something called an action potential threshold, and it's a property of a neuron where you need a certain amount of electrical stimulus in order for the neuron that's connected to the next neuron, for this to fire. It has to get excited a certain amount before the next one fires. If this one fires and it's just a little, it's not going to keep propagating and going on. So the thought will not continue. The action will not continue. The processing of electric current will not continue. So these new neurons, they're different in that they have a lower action potential threshold. And what that means is it takes less stimulus for the next neuron, the new neuron, to keep firing off and keep the chain going. So even though this may have not as much stimulus, the information will still continue because this one's more easily excitable. So what else is important to know about neurogenesis? I think it's one of the greatest things. And I think it's a big part of the process of what I was working with. And so these are the linear explanations. There's stuff that I believe that, it's for another video. I'm trying to stick linear mainly here. So these are more excitable. And I believe that they work. What do brain cells do? Well, they work with thought, processing information. And one of the things that occurs in this process is, I believe it's still true, that 80%, as far as our knowledge is concerned, 80% of these new neurons just die off. They get pruned off. And my theory is because they're not utilized. So you create these neurons, but if you don't have a goal or, something in mind, like a manifestation, for them to work on, then, they're going to feel like, well, here I am, and there's nothing to fucking do. Excuse my language. There's nothing to do, so I'm leaving. But if you're doing these exercises, you're creating these new neurons, and then you're going, go, do this, create this. This is where you get to the next level, because these new neurons, they're new, completely new. So there may be a memory stored in each and every single one of our brain cells that say, well, I was told you can do this in life, or, this is possible and this isn't. No, that's unheard of, not possible. The laws of physics can't be bent, etc., etc. What's interesting is you could tell these neurons to do things, and they're not as limited. So when I was focusing on, become younger, the normal mind, the normal brain structure says that's not possible. Whereas these new baby neurons, they're going to, they're little things just vibrating, trying to create. They're going to try to set up that possibility, regardless of whether it's, theoretically possible or not. And so when I first came across this, it was the third day I felt this coursing energy through my body. The hair went up, and I had all these highs, like I said before, natural highs. But yet I never felt anything like this. And I had taken myself to super highs physically through sports, through pushing myself, working out. I remember one time when I was 13, working out up to 5 hours a day on a hot summer day in the garage. I was sadistic. I mean, I pushed myself like no one else, man. And that's when I knew I was super focused. It was like, that's how I knew how to get super focused. So anyways, so these new baby neurons, neurogenesis, some of these are my theories, and the reason why I came up with these theories is because I looked into, I was like, okay, how is this possible? How was I able to do these things? And this neurogenesis came to me like 20 years ago. To most people, it's still a new concept. And so now there's also another element to the exercise, and that is if you do the aerobics more, that does the BDNF, neurogenesis, creation of new neurons. If you do like weightlifting, man, I should really brush up on all this because I know people find it important. I think it's IGF. There's release of another chemical which reinforces what's referred to as plasticity in your brain. Now, what plasticity is essentially is the more, if you have the same thoughts or if you do the same process, whether it's play a sport, let's say basketball, the more you practice, the better you get. And the reason why is because every time you perform an action and repeat it, your existing brain connections are fortified, or they become highways if you practice it a lot. So, they get stronger because you're utilizing it, so they're trying to become expert at whatever it is you're applying yourself to. Now, what's interesting is working out, like weightlifting, that kind of thing, what it does is it essentially makes those existing highways, it creates more dendrites. So basically there's a neuron, which is the body, and then these things like it branches off, axons with dendrites, so they're like branches. The more you work out, the more branches that you create and existing connections, so they become stronger. The more branches you have, the more dendrites, the stronger the connection. So it fortifies your existing brain function or abilities. That's plasticity. And the way I kind of, if I were to describe plasticity, is practice makes perfect. So the more you do something, the better you get at it. And it's just your brain adapting to a skill that you practice. Makes sense. So there's also that portion. And I think, so visualization, you work with spirit. That's what I do. That's works for me. You don't have to do that, but I highly recommend it. If your visualization of what you're taking in isn't maximal in your mind as to the greatest energy that you can take in, then you're not working with energy that's great enough visually speaking, visualization-wise. And, it's okay to play with imagination. It's one of the more interesting traits that allow you to play with this process. I mean, you could discover, on your own, you could kind of branch off of that. Like my own technique, using the body to focus the mind, using the mind to take in this energy and purifying yourself more. The whole point of taking the energy is you become more it. And since I consider source to be pure energy, well, I'm becoming source in my mind, visualization wise. Whether it's true or not doesn't matter, because what I'm focusing on is being created. That's all the proof I need. All of this other stuff is just theory. I'm trying to give you, as far as I know, the latest possible science as to why it works. And like I said, starting off, I don't know what could be more important than researching how we could best have an effect on the universe itself, on, in this form. So, like I said, you're an energy instrument to perceive different energy forms around you. And the universe itself is energy. So how do you best position yourself to have a greater effect on your environment? Back to the antenna. Not only, the greater the power, it's important. Brain waves have thoughts. That's what the EEG measures. Or thoughts have brain waves, excuse me. And so if you want to really have an effect around the universe here, which is all energy, you want to have power, and the exercise creates that. The focus is specifically the frequency. So everything has a sort of a frequency. This is a little more esoteric, and yeah, I'm using physics properties to explain ideas or thoughts. And so the idea, so I would say a thought. Everything has a certain thought that you have to align yourself with. If you want this one thing, there's a certain thought that goes with that in order to align with it. And so radio stations have frequencies, and you want to be spot on the number. If it's 97.3, you don't want to put it on 97.4, because there's going to be you're not going to be as connected, honed in on what it is that you want. So the power, greater radius of effect, the frequency, honing in on what you want, and that's how, basically your brain works. And that's it for now. Manifestation, Mancheno's manifestation technique. I'll go into, making more videos, explaining further, like let's say just the breathing process, etc., etc. So, like I said, please just for the algorithms, share if you love this information, and subscribe. I appreciate all of you. I love you. Take care. Bye-bye.